What up, what up? Mic test. Happy 420, everybody. Looks like I need to maybe turn this mic down a little. So, I told Kevman and a few other people that I would do this, and there's pretty much no reason not to. So I've been getting into, also let me know if you can hear the mic all right, modular synth stuff recently. And it's a pretty overwhelming hobby, especially in the beginning. But I think it also leads for a lot more educational and just experimental and kind of fun learning process when playing with sounds. Also trying to kind of get more hardware to take some processing power off of my computer. It's also nice not having to look at the computer so much. So I basically want to start by just talking about this case. This is what I started with. It's from Create Audio, which you can see up here. The case is a really important part of the modular synth game, and it can be a very expensive part of it. This happens to be a fairly affordable piece of equipment, going at about $200 for the case, or you can get what they call the nifty bundle, which comes with these two modules on the end here, which we'll get into a little later. But what this case does is it powers these, which is pretty essential. And then it also, this case specifically, comes with some decent functionality that I'll try to show you here, which we have USB to hook up to the computer. I don't find myself using that quite as much as I thought I would, because I have a lot of stuff already plugged in via USB. And so I started discovering the powers of 5-pin MIDI, which is a pretty old school technology that is really functional. And so I'll get into that later, but we have a MIDI in and a MIDI through, which is kind of cool. So you can still send stuff through to another machine if you'd like. And then you have your audio output, which is a 1/4-inch output. And so, yeah, so that's the functionality of connectivity. And I can't express how much I love working with 5-pin MIDI stuff, which has been a really fun learning experience for this whole process. And so the next up on the case here is you have what they call CV in the modular world, which stands for control voltage. Excuse me. And what control voltage is basically the MIDI data, the pitch MIDI, or it can be any kind of signal essentially. It can be an LFO, it can be an envelope. It's any kind of signal. It can be an audio signal, but this converts your MIDI data. Depending on which channel you're sending the MIDI data to, channel 1 will come out of just CV1 and gate 1. What a gate signal is also kind of interesting. I didn't really know until I got into this. It's a binary signal, so it literally just has an on and an off, which is good for your envelopes and for triggering stuff. But it literally just only has a very specific on and off type of setting. There's no gradual increase or decrease, as in with the pitch there can be glide and fluctuation with your curve of your wave signal. There you go. And so then if you're sending stuff through MIDI channel 1, you'll get it through CV1 and gate 1 and CV1. If you're sending it through 2, it'll go through 2 correspondingly. If it goes through 3, it does what I believe if you're sending like a chord through the MIDI data, it'll take the top notes and send it through CV1, and then it'll take the bottom notes and send it through CV2. And then you also have a mod here, which is for like pitch wheels and stuff like that. and then a clock which comes out at whatever. I'm not quite sure how the tempo works on this, but it comes out at a specific tempo at which you're playing your notes at. Um, yeah, so that's the case. And like I said, this thing is super functional for what it is. It also has the two out, so you have to plug in to the two output to come out of the 1/4 inch here to my speaker system. And so what these two modules come with, we'll start with this because it's a little more familiar, I guess, is we have two different oscillators here. This is called chips because these are chip tune oscillators. They don't have a full frequency range, but they do have a decent frequency range. The first oscillator has a tune, a frequency knob, and then also a filter, which is controlled by this knob, and then the output signal comes out of here, and then you also have a wave shaper which morphs through. What do we have? 4 different waves plus a noise, so 5, I guess. We'll get into noise a little later, but we have the sine, triangle, saw, and square. And same for the second oscillator, except for instead of a filter, you have a width, which is like a pulse width, which is like the sides of how long your wave is repeating, kind of. Granted, what I'm saying is very novice in all of this. I don't know much about the technical side of a lot of this, but I do enjoy the functionality of it. And so for the other module here, we have it's basically a sequencer of sorts. You have 2 different directions in which you can send the sequence, which is either what they call rows or columns. And then you have a CV output for each one of these that could be adjusted via this knob and holding the tune button for the corresponding knob and the direction. And then we have a gate that comes out for each time it moves around. You can also hold multiple buttons and then I believe move this knob around and it'll kind of speed up an arpeggiated sequence of it. It does not quantize though, so it doesn't send out, you know, chromatic signals, which is kind of fun in a sense. And so this was the first thing I got with these 2 modules together with this case, because when looking at cases, they are super expensive. And then you still need a power supply, and then you need a bus board, and then you have a thing that can power these modules. So the guys over at Create Audio, super cool. Super cool. Yeah. And so next we have these other 6 modules. When I decided to get these, it was because they basically filled up the case perfectly. And this stuff is fairly new. This, I think, came out in October-ish last year is when I started seeing it. And then this came out in December-ish, I think. And so these came out, and they're actually a very affordable alternative to learning about this stuff because a lot of these things can become very expensive very quickly. But each one of these basically ran about $90 at the time. And so I think they're still around $100 each. But that's, sounds expensive, but some of these things can get really, really expensive really quickly. And so now there's a ton of functionality here. And I'll just kind of go over what each one does real quick. It's going to sound like a lot of jargon, but it doesn't really matter. So here we have an oscillator, which is, as we know, produces the sound. The thing I didn't realize before doing all this was that this thing just makes sound. It doesn't shape sound. You don't get to actually create the way the sound forms. You're just creating the base sound and it outputs consistently. And so what they've done here is they call it a performance VCO, voltage controlled oscillator. And you have your coarse tuning here, and then you also have your fine tuning here. If you decide to select this quantize button here, instead of gliding through the frequencies, you're going to make steps in quantized octaves on this side and semitones on this side, which we'll demonstrate here shortly. And then you also have a waveform shaper, which is also similar to this one in the way that it morphs between the waves. And then it has a pulse width for half of the waves that are on there, which I'll explain a little later as well. Next up, we have what is the eudaimonia. The hysteria is the oscillator. Eudaimonia is the filter. It is a mixer and of a voltage-controlled amplifier. This is something that's kind of confusing in the beginning for people that don't understand hardware synths, and I'm still kind of grasping it myself, but the amplifier is what basically shapes the sound, which is something I didn't realize before. Like I said, the oscillator produces it, and the amplification of it is what produces the overall shape of your sound, which is interesting. And so then this combines your amplifier with a low-pass filter that can be controlled via LFO and CV input here. You can also self-oscillate it, which produces basically another oscillator by using the resonance. The resonance is not CV controllable, but it is cool. Sounds nice. And then you also have a CV controlled high pass filter that does not have resonance. And then on this side is your amplifier level. And so then we're going to skip this delay here because this is basically your standard delay with a few extra little goodies in it that we'll just get around to. The ataxia model here is your envelope generator. It essentially has 3 different modes. One of them is a mod, which depicts the top row right here, which is the rise, the fall, and then you have a delay time. I'm not absolutely positive how this stuff works either, but I have a general good idea on it. And so when you miss with your rise and your fall, and your delay is how long it takes for it to kind of switch between the two. So it's not sustained by a gate input in this mode. But then this slider here will depict the shape of the curve of your overall of your rise and fall. So down here you'll have a much more plucky, sharp, I think it's logarithmic, and then up here is like a sawtooth in the middle, and then up top is the exponential ramp. I believe I might have those backwards. I don't really know my math that well. And then you also have an LFO mode. In LFO mode, I think it's kind of a constant. It's basically the same, except for these are just your LFO rise and fall. So you can get some real plucky, sharp attacks or quick decays. And same with that. And then if you hit both these buttons here, you'll switch it into attack ADSR mode, attack, decay, sustain, release mode. And so then these correspond respectively down here. You can't really see it, but it says ADSR. And so then the trigger input is necessary for the ADSR mode. And I think both of you have 2 different envelopes on here. Selecting it by this button, I think both of them get triggered by both triggers. I don't know. We'll kind of experiment with it here. Here, now moving on, we have this noise crush filter. This is another external input. You can put another signal through here and put it through 2 different low pass and high pass filters again, or a bit crusher, or a digital noise similar to bit crusher is what they call it, a digital noise. And then on its own, without an external input, this is blue noise, a pink noise, the bit crush sound, and then the digital sound. So you can kind of still use this for some good snare sounds, or I like to sometimes make wave, air, breezy sounds, and stuff like that. So, and then last but not least is probably the most underused one because I don't understand it quite enough, but it comes with it's a CV audio manipulator. So up here it calls it the CV and audio manipulation. This is an attenuator or attenuinverter where you can flip a signal and make it reverse or keep it positive. And then you send that signal through, and you can combine it with this internal LFO that is on this module that is also controlled. So this is the amount of the speed of it, and then this is your up here on this fourth one. You can't really see these guys here, but it says LFO there. And so if it's right in the middle, you can get it, which is kind of a pain in the ass to get sometimes if you don't want it to affect the signal you're putting in. But you can also just put in dummy cables, and it'll keep your signal clean. But this is essentially a mult or a mixer for audio, so you can put multiple signals through and then bleed it through to the output, or you can put one signal in and have 3 of it come out, so you can multiply the signal out. And then it also has this weird pulse riser thing that I was kind of actually enjoying playing with yesterday. But it makes every signal that comes through into a square wave. But it only has, as you see the red light flashing, that's when it creates the sound. It's a weird one. Like I said, I don't understand this module the most, I think. So yeah, but we'll still maybe use it here a little bit. But that's a basic rundown. And that took me 20 minutes. Yeah. So let's plug some stuff in here and just maybe see if you guys can kind of understand how this works, right? So I'm going to take the output of this oscillator here. I'm going to set it to a sine wave. It's in quantized mode, so we're going to hear some steps here eventually. And I'm going to plug it into the mixer of this voltage-controlled amplifier here. And so we have 3 different inputs on this mixer. We'll get some more put in there here. I'm going to plug this mixer into the delay that I didn't go over, but it's just a standard delay. It'll make it nice and echoey. And then I'm going to take the output of that delay and plug it into the output of our thing here. So now, if I did things correctly, if I move this amplifier up, we should get some sound here, and it's a really low sound. Might be kind of loud. There we go, that's probably more. If you put too much volume through the amplifier, it will overdrive, which can be cool. So now we're getting a little bit of the delay here. Let's try and get a little more of a clean signal. So if you take it out of quantized mode, it'll... Then you have your semitone. Then we have this is a morphed sine wave, so you can actually mess with the pulse width of it. Feedback. Let me know if there's feedback. So basically, you can kind of see how this thing works. You know, these are the waveforms. So we're just getting straight sounds, right? So now we need to create a envelope. And so now we're going to take the output of our first envelope here that it's already set to ADSR mode. By hitting this button here, I'm actually selecting the curve of the envelope, which is important with the amplifier in this aspect to have it on an exponential curve, so you hear a lot more of it. It's not as plucky. And so now we have that hooked up, but we don't have a gate signal coming in. So we'll take the gate signal from here, from the sequencer, and then we're going to plug it into our trigger here. So now every time we touch here, it will trigger this envelope. So now we can kind of start decay is helpful if you have the sustain all the way down. See, we're not getting much. But if you have the sustain all the way down, you're trying to make like a plucky guitar sound or something, then you can put the decay up. The sustain all the way down and keep messing with the release. See, but now, right, so we're getting some type of sound coming out of here that's not just a straight sound, but now we need the movement here without us having to push those buttons. So I'm going to plug the direction going into the, what we call it, the rows, and then this delay module has a hidden, not hidden, but just an LFO right up top here. So now we're getting movement on our sequencer module, and we're also not getting much sound out of our attack through this. So I think if we fiddle with this a little bit, give it some good release. So now we're getting a rhythmic pattern, but it's the same tone. So we can also take the CV signal coming out of this row column here and plug it into this. This isn't going to be quantized. It's not going to sound super in key by any means. But we can also move this knob here. Kind of changing the sequence. And we also speed it up and slow it down via this LFO rate. Now we'll take an LFO from our chips module here. So the way this LFO works is that the output 2 triggers 4 times as fast as output 1. So we'll take the slower one and we're going to set it to a sine triangle wave there. Depth all the way up. Plug this into maybe, let's try our waveform. So I'll slow down this LFO just a little here. I'm going to turn up the delay just so we can hear the delay. Delay will self-oscillate as well, which is kind of fun to play with, but you have to be careful. Alright, so now, obviously, that's getting a little old, right? So what we'll do here is we're going to move the output of the oscillator of the mixer here. Nope, we need to actually move the output of the oscillator. And so, as you can see, it's a trial and error process. Not even really trial and error, but it's really just kind of intuitive once you start digging in to what you're trying to do here. And what you know, either the more you understand, the better, of course, but you can also have some pretty good amounts of fun with just, you know, playing around. So I actually didn't need to unplug these ones.
But I put the signal through the bit crusher, which I've really been enjoying playing with because you get some good vocal sounds. Maybe some 8-bitty bit reduction. I don't quite know how to explain it, but you get some pretty cool. Here, let's just turn that down real quick. Turn down the delay for now as well. And so what we can do here, turn the envelope back up. What do we gotta do here? What's going on? This happens sometimes. Why doesn't this work? I hear a little something. These lights are helpful for indicating what's happening within the synth itself, which is kind of nice. Makes it feel more like a spaceship. What's going on here? Oh, you know what it is? It's happening. I just took the. I'm a dumbass. Dumas. It's Dumas, everybody. So I had the bit reduction all the way down, so then it wasn't actually putting the signal through. So I'll take this LFO here and plug it into the CV control for the bit reduction. Give this guy a little bit of juice. Turn this down a little. Yeah, I basically just wanted to kind of go over this stuff and just kind of show you the general flow of how things go. And as you've seen, I just kind of start thinking about how I can change things within the system of it, and it becomes very intuitive, and it's really fun, really fun. I don't record it as much as I should, but it is really fun to just kind of lose it for a few hours and just kind of explore what's going to go to happen down in Modular Land. Some good Mario sounds coming out of here. And this isn't even the chiptunes oscillator. We can try and plug in this second oscillator here and see what happens. Turn down the volume. Okay, so now it's not going to be in tune. So in this case, right, if I really wanted to make this have the same pitches here, and for sanity's sake, I'll unplug that for now. I will take this CV signal here that I was using to make my weird ping, 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 ping. Right, so I'm going to take that, plug it into this. I'm going to move this LFO for now, so that way. And like I said earlier, I'm going to actually put in a couple dummy chords here, and that'll deactivate the control that these have that would affect this signal normally. And so then I'll turn this positive. So I have a positive source of that CV signal coming in. And now I can take these three outputs here and I can still plug them in. So now we have sound back. Where'd my output go? Right, so we have that guy back, but now we can take this guy here, plug him in. Still got to tune it. I don't know exactly how to tune it super correctly, but just gonna do it till it sounds not horrible. A little detuned isn't necessarily bad, especially when you're just exploring synthesis. And so then we do have different wave shapes on that second oscillator. So I'll turn down the hysteria module. And so this is just the second oscillator, which I tend to favor. One of the tricks that I learned right away when I first just had these two modules was FM synthesis. Of course, has a famous makes crazy sounds. But what I first decided to try here was if you take the frequency of the first oscillator and plug it into the pitch of the second one here, and then you turn the filter all the way counterclockwise. Sine waves. You gotta just dial it in. So sometimes what I'll do at this one is it's a very sensitive input on this delay module. So now that's going straight through the delay module because we have a separate input here that's actually apparently like an instrument input for like guitars and stuff, which is kind of cool. So then we'll add the some delay going on it. I think the time is CV controllable. It's also hardwired to the LFO, I've noticed, in some way, shape, or form. I'm not quite sure here. Then let's maybe take the same our second envelope here, and finally some filter manipulation. Modulation works better with the logarithmic, or at least in some cases. Sometimes it takes me a minute to dial in. Turn the bleep bloops down for a second. Let's see. Aha. So, like I said, as you can see, very fun to just kind of. Like I said, you can also plug this in via USB or MIDI, 5-pin MIDI. Finally have videos out. Not finally, excuse me, but we were before you understand what this thing is so I didn't really think I would enjoy this noise crush filter as much as I do. So that's maybe something. Reasons that the LFOs aren't very they're still fun for keeping tempo, sync. But one thing that this bit crush and digital noise unit is good for is sending random gate signals as well, which is something I didn't know also before doing this, was that noise, like, you just take, let's see, a little more tone to it than I thought it would. What I'm trying to say is that noise can be used as a random source of a control voltage, which is super fun and interesting. Back in. persuasive, right? Okay. So now, what I was going to demonstrate is this the bit crush has a little bit more variation, so I'll use that for pitch in the octaves. And then I'm going to take out this LFO temporarily. I need to send a new gate signal. That's why we're not getting any sound. So that's what we're going to use digital. Alright, so now we're in LFO mode. Sometimes I gotta like reset this to be like, where the hell am I? Let's see, can we make this sound good? So now we're getting our gate signal for our envelopes. This digital noise output. To our bit crush. And let's maybe try to figure out if we can Modular Monday patch. YouTube. Shoutouts to them for all out of live wants to kind of not stare at a computer as much, but still make weird sounds. Just unplug that. And we'll talk to you guys later. Peace.